This time of the year is always really interesting in the NBA because we have Summer League. No sport does a better job of showcasing their new rookies that were just picked in the draft as quickly and as well as the NBA does with Summer League. And I actually went to go see some of these guys play in person. And I'm here to tell you right now, you have to be really careful about how you're evaluating these players so far in Summer League. First up, let's talk about Victor Wembanyama. Now, there's not a lot to say about him that hasn't already been said, but with his performances so far in Summer League, I do think that we've learned a few things. One, offensively, it's going to take a little bit more time, I think, than people maybe realized initially. It's going to be a lot more, three-point shooting, pick and pop stuff. It's going to be a little bit harder for him to get to the rim, and he's going to have to work on his handle and things like that. But defensively, his impact is unbelievable. When I was sitting there watching him, in person, I was thinking, even if he's guarding someone on the perimeter, obviously he has great rim protection skills, but even when he's guarding someone on the perimeter, it's almost like you can't take the jump shot if you're the guy with the ball. You kind of have to swing the ball because he's going to block it. And it's just a really interesting dynamic, and I'm excited to see how, his career starts in San Antonio. But again, when it comes to player evaluation, it's really difficult to pinpoint exactly what's happening with him because San Antonio's guards are really bad. They don't have a true point guard. That's an issue for a lot of Summer League teams, and a lot of these guys, Jabari Smith last year, someone that we're going to talk about later in the video, a lot of these guys are put in situations where they're uncomfortable because they're the highest drafted player, they need to be the guy that's creating and initiating offense. And that's just not where a lot of these players' strengths lie, at least at the top of this draft as well as last year's. And that's going to be something we're going to continue to have to keep an eye on, not for Wemby because he's done for Summer League, but as he begins his NBA career. All right, let's talk about what has been the biggest disappointment in Summer League so far, at least as of the recording of this video, and that is Brandon Miller. He's played a good amount of Summer League already because he played before Charlotte even got to Vegas, and he had a better performance here recently, but initially in Summer League, the big concerns that I had for him were just he wasn't very present on the floor. Yes, you'd like for him to make some more jump shots, you'd like for him to score better, but I just didn't really notice him on the floor that often. And when you watch the game, especially his first few in Vegas, you'd think, okay, if I had my friend here that's never seen the NBA before, and I'm like, hey, one of these players on the floor just got picked second overall right behind the guy that you just watched be 7'5", tell me who that player is. And I think it'd be really difficult for someone, if they've never seen the NBA before, to point out Brandon Miller's the second overall pick in those games. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to be bad. And this is something that we really have to harp on here about the Summer League, is that all the time, every single year, there are players that are really bad and really good and has no translation almost ever to their success in the NBA as rookies. Second year players maybe, but as rookies, there's not that much of a correlation between Summer League success or lack of success and how their NBA career is going to go. I think Brandon Miller is still very talented, but just like with Wemby, when he has better guards around him, guys that are going to set him up, it's likely going to look better because on-ball creation, getting to the rim, all the pick and roll stuff, he's fine at that, but that's not necessarily his main strength. And having him do a lot of that and then also having him be really passive at times just never really worked for him. It's hard for him to get into a rhythm. I would expect him to get better as the week goes on. I wouldn't be freaking out necessarily about Brandon Miller if I was a Hornets fan. I would be upset that I don't have Scoot Henderson because despite the fact that we've barely seen Scoot play so far, I think he's going to be really good. But again, that's just kind of part of the warning here. Don't get too high or too low on an individual prospect based off of a couple of Summer League games because it's not real NBA basketball. There's NBA players out there, but it's not the same thing at all. Speaking of Scoot Henderson, that same test that I talked about with Brandon Miller, where it was hey, bring your friend that's never seen the NBA before and be like, hey, who do you think is the guy that just got picked third overall? We haven't seen Scoot play a ton, but in the minutes that he played, I'm very confident that person could pick out, that's the guy. There's a presence to Scoot Henderson when he's on the floor. It seems like a great leader already, and as a lead guard, he has everything apart from being a great pull-up three-point shooter. That's literally it. He's great in the mid-range, strong finisher, can get to the rim and get by his guy pretty much anytime he wants to. Really good playmaker. And Portland's got to be ecstatic right now that they were able to go up to 3 and that Charlotte took Brandon Miller 2 just because of how Scoot fits their team. There's not really much more to say here for Scoot. I think that's a performance, and that's an indication that you can take and say, you know what, this guy's going to be awesome. We can just go ahead and roll forward with that. You don't want to take too much from Summer League, but everything that we saw from Scoot, despite it being very limited in terms of his overall minutes, says that this guy's the real deal. Then I want to talk about the Thompson Twins, and I'll talk about some guys from last year's draft after that. We didn't get to see Amen play basically at all. He played, limited minutes in the first game and sprained his ankle. I am just continually impressed though by both him and Asar Thompson. there's something about them that just makes me root for them, makes me feel good about them as players, because they both are really, really good playmakers when they get the opportunity. They're strong with the ball in their hands, like not outstanding shooters. Asar should be a little bit ahead of schedule, or at least ahead of Amen, I should say, in terms of as a shooter. But there's just something about both of them in terms of their athleticism, their defensive ability, how hard they play, how unselfish they are. I think both of them are going to be really, really good. And I'm excited to see how each of them perform in a little bit more on-ball roles at times, because both teams, obviously Detroit and Houston, have, Cade Cunninghams and Jaden Ivies and Jalen Greens and Fred VanVleets. I'm interested to see if those guys will maybe come off the bench. The Thompson Twins will come off the bench and get an opportunity to run some of the second unit stuff, because I think there's a lot of value in what they bring defensively, their athleticism, but also their creation on the ball. And I think that's something that I would certainly look to explore. And again, you don't want to take away too much from Summer League, but all of the intangible stuff, just their presence on the floor and their athleticism and all that stuff, like, they absolutely look like they belong. All right, now let's talk about some of these second-year guys, because to me, this is where we get in the most trouble when it comes to evaluating Summer League players, is we see the second-year jump from someone in Summer League and assume that that means they are going to be awesome. However, I'm going to kind of go against my own rule here, because there are two guys that I think have shown a significant second-year jump that I think it is 100% real. To me, Summer League, a second-year jump from a player isn't as big of a deal as, like, if you're, James Bouknight from Charlotte and you're like, hey, bud, and we've been doing this for a little bit now and you can't really perform in Summer League still, like, that's an issue. If you're still really bad, if you're Johnny Davis and you still don't look very good as a second-year player in Summer League, that's a concern. But Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren both were unbelievably impressive. Now, Jabari Smith didn't get off to a great start in his first, I think, half, maybe 2.5 quarters. But then ever since then, the confidence was there, the jump shooting was there. He averaged, I think, almost 40 points a game, over 35 points per game, and didn't even shoot that well from three-point range. There's a confidence level there. You can see all the defensive stuff as well. And he really, I think, is going to show a lot of growth in terms of that on-ball creation. Of course, we know he can shoot the ball. And now that Houston's roster is a little bit more filled out with playmakers, guys that can handle the ball, guys that can set him up, I think Jabari Smith is going to be really, really good. I'm not going to lie. I was concerned about him at times last year because of how limited his confidence was. And I understood the defensive ability that he brought to the table, but was he more like a high floor, low ceiling kind of guy? But now you're starting to see the ceiling of what this guy can become and how much of a connector he can be for a Houston roster that does look very, very interesting for this upcoming season. But more excitingly than that to me is Chet Holmgren, because he is, like, in a much lower way, he's like the Wemby of his class last year, where it's like, we don't really know what to do with this. Like, he's big, he handles the ball like a guard, he can shoot, he can be a really impactful defender, but he's very skinny. We're worried about the injuries. And then, of course, obviously, he's like 5 inches shorter than Wemby. But not really getting to see him at all last year after getting hurt. This was a really important Summer League for him, I feel like, and the confidence that he has already, defensively, offensively, all of it is really, really promising. I mean, some of the defensive stuff that he's doing, even being a skinnier guy, is going to be so impactful for an Oklahoma City team that for years has played really, really small. And to have someone out there that doesn't, negatively impact their floor spacing, but can give them the rim protection that they desperately need, that's going to be huge for them. And offensively, like, it's not just, okay, let me stand on the wing and let me pick and pop and let me shoot these threes. He's attacking closeouts. He's trying to dribble through guys. He's got some passing stuff in there. And just like Wemby, he's going to have to get stronger still. You're still worried about the injury stuff with each of them, just with guys falling all around them. The foot injury stuff, which we've already seen with Chet. And both of them kind of try and dribble through guys a little bit too much. And that's just going to be difficult, for them to manage at the NBA level. But regardless, he showed some flashes of stuff on each end of the floor that make me very excited for what's going to happen for Oklahoma City moving forward. And overall, I'm excited about every single player that I talked about. I think maybe the guy that I'm most concerned about is Brandon Miller, just because he doesn't have that presence. But that's how I felt about Jabari Smith last year. Now he was awesome in Summer League this year. But the point to the video is, having seen these guys in person, like, this is kind of my understanding and my evaluation of them, as well as watching the game since I've been home. But also, let's not get too excited and too up about, especially guys that we know are incredibly talented. We know, because of where they were drafted, are much better prospects than 99% of the players that they're playing against. And it's not real NBA basketball. It's not translatable. There aren't as many good guards. There aren't as many good rim protectors. And so we want to be careful of that. However, I'm still very excited for the future of every single one of these guys that I talked about.